Hey folks, welcome to Mr. Morefield's World History class once again. Today we are going from India, climbing up over the Himalaya mountains, those high, huge Himalaya mountains, Mount Everest, and climbing over to the plateau of Tibet into the Chinese territory. We're going to find ourselves along the Yellow River to learn about this interesting people. That's right, an interesting people to say the least. And so let's go get our learning on as we learn about the ancient Chinese. All right, so here's a people who have chosen to settle along the Huanghe River. The Huanghe, H-U-A-N-G-H-E. Yeah, try to say that one 5 times fast. Also known as the Yellow River. Just call it the Yellow River. It's called the Yellow River because it actually does look yellow from the silt. Let's look at that. You know, there were many pros and cons to living here. They were surrounded by natural barriers. Can you think of any reasons why that might help them? Well, let's take a look at some of these natural barriers as we speak. And so they were surrounded by deserts, tall mountains, oceans and coastline. The deserts to the northwest, to the northeast, all across the top there are two of them called the Taklamakan as well as the Gobi Desert. There are tall mountains to the south and west. That plateau is right where the word mountains you see there is. That plateau is called the Plateau of Tibet, which is a very tall plateau. And then they had the oceans, the Yellow Sea, and the Pacific Ocean mainly because the Pacific Ocean is so vast and also so deep. In fact, it's the deepest ocean in the world. There are parts of it very, very deep, even taller than the Himalayan mountains. And so, can you think of some cons? You can think of some pros for sure. And that is, they are protected, aren't they? They're isolated here. But also the cons would be, because they are isolated, they have little to no outside influence or contact with other people in other parts of the world. And some of those natural barriers are deserts. The Gobi, again, north, it's one of the driest on this earth. The Taklamakan Desert, say that one 5 times fast, Taklamakan. It has been said that this desert is the Sea of Death because it's the second largest in the world and it is the home to snakes and to very cold nights, as well as very dry conditions and even sandstorms. The Taklamakan Desert, the Gobi Desert, certainly are barriers to China. But not only deserts, but the Plateau of Tibet. A plateau doesn't necessarily seem too much like a barrier, but in fact it is. As you come across the Himalayan mountains from the south into China, you cross the Plateau of Tibet. It is still very elevated. If you think about the definition of a plateau, you have a good idea an understanding of what that is all about. You have an elevated area, and the elevated area, even though it's flat on top, a plateau, and it's relatively flat, there are still some hills and things, and in fact the Plateau of Tibet has some tall mountain ranges, even as tall as 28,000 feet. And so you're talking about a very tall plateau. It's not going to be easy for a people to cross over that. It's not going to be easy for after an enemy, perhaps from India, crosses over the Himalaya mountains, and here they are in some way getting over that. Here they are trying to cross the Plateau of Tibet. And so the Plateau of Tibet definitely serves as a barrier as well as the mountains below it there. Now, continuing on, the Himalaya mountains separate China and India, as we said before, and especially last class when we were discussing India. The world's tallest mountains are here. And as you know, Mount Everest is the world's tallest mountain range. Another barrier would be the Pacific Ocean. It was the eastern barrier to China, the world's largest ocean. Now think of all the fishing and the traveling one could do to bring into your civilization of China. And today, certainly, that is done. In fact, our coastline of here in the United States, California, Oregon, and Washington all are connected to China through and by the Pacific Ocean. Now, let's think about the rivers. They're not natural barriers, but certainly, why in the world would these people choose to settle? Why do we find the very first civilization along the Yellow River? Well, first of all, the Yellow River is also known as the Huanghe River. It's yellow because of the yellow, muddy silt that it carries. Yes, when you look at it from a picture, you're going to see that it is muddy. It is actually yellow. Now, this provides water to northern China. As you can see on the map, you'll see that the Yellow River runs through northern China, and then it eventually empties into the Yellow Sea. Now, I have a question for you. Why do you suppose that the river is called the River of Sorrows? the River of Sorrows. The Yellow River, the Huangshi River, is called the River of Sorrows because it would often flood, and it would damage homes and wipe away their crops, and in fact kill many people. Therefore, it's called the river, the Great River of Sorrows. And so there are definitely pros to living along the Yellow River and the Yangtze River, which we're going to talk about, but also there are some cons as well. The Yangtze River is the largest and longest in China. It cuts through central China and it flows from Tibet, that is the plateau of Tibet, to the Pacific Ocean. Now, the first civilization, however, began along the Yellow River, but the Yangtze River, of course, would have ancient Chinese civilizations as well. Now, I want you to think back to something here. Think back to previous civilizations. Think back and ask yourself this: why did people choose to settle along rivers? That's right, you understand. You know why they chose to settle along rivers. They chose to settle along rivers because of food, water, and shelter, the essentials to life. You use the things that grow around the rivers to build your shelters. You use it to fish there. There are animals that are going to be in these forests that are around that are going to come and drink water that you could actually use for food or use to domesticate. And in fact, they did just that. You're able then to have clothing because of these things. You're able to weave them or make them from the products that grow around these rivers. The Chinese would plant rice and grow rice around the region. They were able to domesticate pigs and sheep in this region, and they were able to use, obviously, the rivers for travel and use the great soil that comes through there to fertilize their crops. And so they were set there in the Yellow River. It was a perfect place to be, perfect place to settle. That's why these people chose, this early civilization chose to settle along that river, and the population then in turn would grow and the civilization would thrive, and there you would have it. The ancient Chinese people, they are settled in for the long haul. They are ready to grow and to prosper and to create this civilization that we're going to talk about in the next video. But that's going to do it for this video about the geographical features of ancient China. So here's some review questions for you. Number 1, what is the geographical feature separating China from India? Number 2, how did China's geographical features isolate them from other parts of the world? And number 3, in which river valley did China's civilization begin? Now, if you know the answers to these questions, you have a general sense as to what this lesson has been about. All right, folks, that's going to do it for the geographical features of ancient China. Thank you so much for watching. Where there is no struggle, there is no progress. Frederick Douglass. Happy learning.